But more important, if you focus on what's going on right now in your life and how bad things are, that has all your attention. Whatever has your attention happens. So if your attention is there in a fear area, it's going to continue that way. So I say to you, look ahead. We are going to be opening up again. We are going back to work again, all of us. It's only a matter of time. So look at it. When we're ready to go back, am I ready to go back? What can I do now in the meantime, whatever business you're in, your restaurant, your salons, whatever business you're in? Can I call some of my customers up and say, hi, how you doing? I'll be all ready for you in such and such a date. Think ahead. It gets your mind off what's going on today. And what's going on today isn't good. If it's not okay, it's not the end.
In this world of so much unprofessionalism, where people are just clocking it in versus bringing it on, where people are lost in this trance of distraction, suffering from collective attention deficit disorder, you can operate and apply this second mentality. Rather than being superficial, be really rigorous. Be a professional. If you're not over-prepared for a meeting, you're under-prepared. Spend a lot of your free time reading and learning about your career, about your industry, about the work that you do. Get a mentor if you are serious about being rigorous around your craft. Make the time at least once a week to pull out your journal and deconstruct your week. Just deconstruct the way you do things. When you are working on a project, don't just slap it together. Don't just rush right through it. There is such an attraction to doing things quickly now because everything is quick. Messaging is coming to us so quickly. We can access information so quickly. We can access entertainment so quickly. We get our food so quickly. And as a result of that, we do our work too quickly. Okay, this is the not superficial, the second mentality, the rigorous mentality. Go deep versus wide. Go deep versus wide. Go deep versus wide. If you look at any great master, they were monomaniacally focused on going deep around one thing. Khalil Gibran wrote one of my favorite books, The Prophet. I heard he carried it around with him for 5 years to get every single word right. That's a craftsperson. When you look at the great athletes, I recently was in San Francisco and I watched Steph Curry play. Steph Curry was fluid like a ballerina on the court. I have NBA superstars coming to my live events. And when I watch them, they are so focused on going deep around their skill versus being all things to everyone. Third mentality of mastery is the leader versus victim mentality. And if you've read The Leader Who Had No Title, I talk about it a lot. But you have a choice when you go to work every day. When you show up in business every day, you have a choice. You can be a victim or you can be a leader. You can't be both. And what's the hallmark of a victim? Well, you give away your power. You say, well, I'm not the boss. I don't need to bring on my A game today. Or I went through a divorce 10 years ago and I'm going to blame my ex-spouse and give away my power and be a bitter person versus an optimistic leader. That's what victims do. They say, well, I'm resigned to average. Why should I take the time to read a book, to build a friendship, to transcend a fear? Why should I do that? That's how victims think. They use words like, I hate and I can't and that would never work. And they love to criticize because every victim was once a dreamer who got hurt. And now they sit back in their armchairs and they criticize other people because they're too frightened to get into the game. So you can be a victim not only in your work but in your life, or you can be a leader. And as you know, you can lead without a title, right? I have seen janitors behave like leaders. I have seen taxi drivers bring on their A game. I have seen so-called ordinary people running so-called ordinary jobs with a sparkle in their eye. And they work with love. They work with attention to detail. They work like their work is the most important work in the world.
I think what I do is, and I talk about this in Sell or Be Sold. I've been a sales guy for a long time, and I just learned early on, and I was terrible at sales. 17 years old, 18, 19, part-time sales guy, I was awful. When I finally realized that sales was the only job I could get at 25 years old, I'm just like, dude, I just got to tell people the truth because I can't do all these tricks. The NLP, right. And look, if it works for you, good, whatever, but the mirroring, the matching, they ask a question, you ask a question, the hot potato, I've heard all these strategies. And I'm like, dude, I just can't do it. I'm just gonna be me. Hey guys, I'm moving from LA, I'm out of work, I'm looking for opportunity, I'm trying to move my family here. My name's Louis Curtis. 2008 beat me up. I got to get my family out of LA. Real estate's impossible. I can't buy it there. It's priced out of the market. And I'm here in Pueblo because I think there's opportunity here, and that's all I'm looking for. No handouts, no help. I got an old truck with me. I got no money. I left my kids with. You got to have your story so people enroll, but you also have to be talking to the right audience. I only spent time with people that were able, capable, qualified. I spent no time. I was in a meeting once in Pueblo. I walked into the meeting, assessed the situation, and bounced. I said, guys, I'm done. I'm out of here. Boom, and I walked out. And my partner at that time, you'll see it later in the later shows, he's like, what just happened? I'm like, there's nothing here, bro.
There's no money here.
There's no opportunity here. And I'm on a clock. I couldn't tell him I'm on a clock. I couldn't tell anybody. So I had these little secrets going on. So, how do you enroll people? It's like, you got to get enrolled. My personal integrity and ethics is why I can sell so hard. And because I believe in my product, I believe in my investment vehicle, I believe in my company. I don't trick people, screw people. Like 35 years I've been in business, there's not one person in 35 years that says I owe them money. There's people that try to get stuff from me using lawyers and bullshit, but there's nobody that can say I ever financially damaged them in any way, not a penny. And so that allows me to go back into the world and push. It allows me to sell tickets for big prices. When I spend $7 million to rent Mandalay Bay, dude, I can sell anybody a $20,000 ticket. Like I spent, somebody complained about my ticket prices. I'm like.
So my number one objective is to tell you that you need to have your own principles. I'll explain some things, but I'm going to share some of my principles. I hope they're helpful to you. There are things that have worked for me that I've written down over a period of time. But number one, I want to describe this experience to you. Whenever you're in a situation, and if you take the time after that situation and you write down your criteria for making decisions, then you will have that for the next time that thing comes along. And what happens is the same things happen over and over again for the same kind of reasons, but you don't see that. You're operating in a way where you take them one at a time. And so I would recommend to you that you write those principles down. When you do that, you think about them in a deeper way, and then the people that are in your lives then start to understand how you're behaving, and they can be partners in that idea meritocratic decision making, so that they can also say, is that the best way to operate and deal with that situation? And so you start to think in a more principled way rather than all of these bits and pieces of different things. So that would be my recommendation. But what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of my journey, and it's totally correct, as Peter says. I'm really a very ordinary guy who, through trial and error, discovered some things that worked that helped me do what Peter was describing. So what I want to explain is, like, we look at the world, and there are just so many different things to have principles for. Principles are essentially recipes for dealing with situations that happen over and over again. And there's just a million things you could study. You could be a doctor, you could be a physicist, you could be someone. And the things that I understand and spend time with was economics, investments, and then work. And my approach was largely captured in this slide, which is to say, like, I would go after audacious goals, and then I would succeed and fail, and most importantly, benefited from failure. In other words, you go after your goals, and you then encounter your problems or your failures. And how you're dealing with those problems is one of the most important things. I started to realize, for reasons you'll probably see as we go along, that pain plus reflection equals progress. In other words, that painful situation, if you can diagnose what produced that failure and then develop principles for dealing with it at a different time, in a different way, and then you take those principles and you improve, you learn, you change things, then you improve and you make better, go on to more audacious goals. And the way I look at life is pretty much like it's this looping process, this evolutionary looping process. That means you go after your audacious goals, you fail, you learn. Failure is an important part of that process. You learn principles, you keep improving. And so I think that I learned that there are only 5 things that you need to do to be successful. If you do these 5 things, you will be successful. And the first is to be clear on what your goals are. You have to know what you're going after. You can't have everything in the world, but you could have almost anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. If you go after your goals and they're clear, you have to know your goals. And along the way, number 2 is you have to identify and not tolerate your problems. A lot of people tolerate problems. And then you have to diagnose those problems to get at the root cause of those problems. And often the root cause is you. Maybe you have weaknesses. Maybe you make mistakes. And with that, or maybe somebody else is making mistakes. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And the power of being able to know our strengths and weaknesses and know how to deal with them is enormous. And only when you know what your problems are and you diagnose that specifically, can you create a design to get around those problems. And that design, very specific design, you go get around the problems, and then if you have a design, you have to be reliable in doing that. And everybody is bad at some of these steps. And the key is to work with other people who are good where you're weak. So I just want to give you a sense of failure. I think probably the greatest problem of mankind, it's a big statement, biggest problem of mankind, the greatest tragedy of mankind is individuals who have in their minds wrong opinions that they're attached to. And they could so easily stress test those, to put them out there and find out if they're strong or weak in terms of those opinions, and to move beyond that to make better decisions. And it's a tragedy because it could be so easily dealt with. You can reduce the chances of being wrong by properly stress testing.
That really, and it's accepted and it's given and it's presented, by the way, in markets and in life, where people say things, but it's not really what they do. And sometimes you have to look at what's real as opposed to what people say.
Right.
In other words, if you answer that question most of the time here, people say, "Oh, you really have to focus and read the Wall Street Journal and be the kind of person who's interested in that." And then I think, well, my predecessor was a major in English literature. I was a history major. It wouldn't have occurred to me in a million years to go to Wall Street. I went to law. By the way, I didn't even do business law. I wasn't doing corporate law. I was doing, something in the entertainment space. Totally foreign for this. There was no, gosh, other kids wanted to be firemen and ballerinas. I wanted to be an investment banker. No, it wasn't like that. And I think that one should think of these things, and I said this the other, it was quoted back to me, so I said this when I was last week in Sydney at some point, because someone asked me a question like this, and I thought, and I said, to be successful in this firm or in life, any part of life, I think what you have to try to be, and by the way, successful, not economically successful, but successful to yourself, in other words, be happy, to some extent, you have to certainly know the content of your business and your focus. And it's very important to have focus, and I don't doubt that you get a lot of information and advice on the focus part, because that's what everybody thinks is the only thing you have to do. But I think you also have to be, and maybe this is even more important at the end of the day, you also have to be a complete person. You have to be interesting. You have to have interest away from the narrow thing of what you do. You have to be somebody who's interesting to yourself, but you have to be somebody who somebody else wants to talk to. And people in these jobs and things like that, you don't get locked up in a barrel, chained to a desk, fed food under the door, just churning out spreadsheets. Nobody's gonna ask you to churn out this spreadsheet even if you're good at it. You have to be a complete person, and I think the order of things should be in your early life and your earliest part, like college, I think it should be for becoming a complete person. And then get more and more focused. You don't want to start out, focus now, and get narrow from there. Now's the time when you should, people, I think, should take, and I know it doesn't feel like that. In other words, and by the way, your big brother or sister in this firm may not say that to you, but look at what really they did. Look who they are. In other words, if you want to look at who's successful in the firm or in any other firm, go through that and really look at who they were. And sometimes this comes up to me in a lot of contexts. Somebody will say, oh my goodness, let's go. I want to be a 2-year analyst at Goldman, then 2 years at a private equity firm, going to go to business and do that. And I said, because that's the mantra and that's the protocol and that's the thing. And I said, by the way, those people who you want to emulate in the world, who are those successful people who are going to hire you for that 2-year, what did they do? That's not what they did. Some of them were in government for 15 years, some of them worked at Goldman Sachs for 20 years and really became very, very adept at something before they went. But they didn't do what they're saying, and they're not lying to you. If you slap the lie detector on them, they'd be telling, it's just not the narrative. I think you have to be more, I said this, I riffed on this in another context, I know some people saw it. I like to read history, and I like to read the biographies part of history, because I like to know what people really did that get it, because you'd find that nobody took that kind of a straight line. And so when people hear and worry, oh my God, I'm getting out of college already, and I don't know how to, discount a cash flow. I mean, I promise you, if you're here for 15 minutes, you'll know how to do that. And having studied it in college for 4 years, and then having your 15 minutes here learning it won't make you know it more. And 6 months after you're here, no one will remember who did it. But if you have a more breadthy kind of an academic career, where you learn more stuff and you're more interesting, and you read a Shakespeare play and you took an art course, that's going to serve you well, not just in your personal life, in your business life. You should be a more.
I've had businesses though that have failed before that, and when you don't have any customers, that's your answer. Yeah. Because even if it's a labor of love, I tried to play the piano and the guitar for a while, and we had a band called the Not So Human Beings. There's a reason why you never heard of it.
That's awesome.
But it was a great name. But yeah, and there was a time to quit. So when you don't have any customers and people aren't reacting to it the same way you are, one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur is that we all lie to ourselves. We're the best. We're the fastest, the greatest, the this or the that is. If you find yourself always describing your company and how you're different in terms of ers and s, you've got issues and you're probably lying to yourself. You have to be brutally honest. You have to ask yourself, if it wasn't me, if I was on the outside looking in, what would I say about this company? And if you're not able to do that, that's a bigger problem, but you just have to be brutally honest.
We can access entertainment so quickly, we get our food so quickly, and as a result of that, we do our work too quickly. Okay, this is the not superficial, the second mentality, the rigorous mentality. Go deep versus wide. Go deep versus wide. Go deep versus wide. If you look at any great master, they were monomaniacally focused on going deep around one thing. Khalil Gibran wrote one of my favorite books, The Prophet. I heard he carried it around with him for 5 years to get every single word right. That's a craftsperson. When you look at the great athletes, I recently was in San Francisco and I watched Steph Curry play. Steph Curry was fluid like a ballerina on the court. I have NBA superstars coming to my live events. And when I watch them, They are so focused on going deep around their skill.